Yeah. Yes, yes, you're sharing everything now.
This event is brought to you by Engineers My and Ruby My. Today's venue and food is sponsored by our friends of Hivekind, helping tech companies succeed by building reliable web applications. And now to introduce myself, I'm Helio, one of the organizers of the Ruby meetup. We have Tristan here as well, which is both an organizer and a host here today. He works at Hivekind and was the one helping us to get the space here today. Let me see what else. Reminder for the folks online, if you send comments in the streaming, your profile name, picture, and comment is going to show up in the stream and it's going to be recorded. We abide by the Ruby Language Code of Conduct. You can find that on that link. What else? And that's pretty much it. So without further ado, today I'll be talking to you guys about Rails assortments, Rails credentials, let's benchmark, and there was something else that I want to talk today. It was three things, but I forgot what the third thing was, and so we ended up getting these two ones. All right, so let me get started. I promise, for all you guys that were here last month, I promise you guys today I'm not going to talk for 2 hours, okay? I'm going to keep it short. And this talk took way, way less time than the past keys last time. And so let's get into it. It's just a few things. So what I'm going to talk today here is just a few things that I ended up using the past couple weeks as I was building the Banking Hackathon Rails app. So I'm going to talk about Rails credentials and that little gem called Benchmark IPS. Rails credentials. So that's the documentation, is a security thing. If you guys been around for a while, this is kind of new. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I don't use Rails credentials in most of the apps that I run. But this one, I just built a fresh new app about a month ago, and I was like, oh, I'm going to start using these and see how it goes. And there's some handy commands there that I'm going to show you guys. And for you to edit these things, it sounds like they have some nice way for you to do the credentials editing with some VS Code or TextMate and that kind of stuff. And I'm not gonna do that. I have a fresh Ubuntu machine here, so I'm gonna use my VI, good old VI. So here are some commands that I'm going to show you guys, and I'm just going to open the terminal and we'll poke around these and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So here there's some pros and cons about Rails credentials compared to the old .env file, right? The unencrypted .env file. So pros, one is encrypted, the other one is not encrypted. One of the cons is if you make a configuration change, you need to commit that file to the repo because now the encrypted file is in the repo. So if you change the app name, if you change the domain URL or any kind of settings, you need to commit and deploy. And there was one time in this app that I run, that I built a few weeks ago, that I had to change one of the domains for the application. And I was like, oh, to change a configuration environment, I need to commit and to redeploy everything. It's kind of a little inconvenient. Before, I just log into the dashboard, log into the console, change the file, that's it. Fair enough, you have to restart your application, but you don't need to deploy, go to CI, all that kind of stuff, and then deploy full production deployment just to change one environment variable. One of the pros is a YAML structure. Now you can have a nested hash, very long with a bunch of stuff. You can organize AWS keys, rollbar keys, New Relic keys, and all those things organized in a structure. But one of the side effects that I found was like, in order for you to access, you need to do like Rails.applications.credentials some API key versus the environment way, right? env.some API key, env.fetch, if you prefer one or the other, either one of the syntaxes. So this is a lot longer to put in the code. It's like, it becomes like really ugly. Anyway, in my opinion, right? So I thought it was like, compared to what I've been using for a while. Easy to maintain structure there, like I said. And there's some handy validations for empty keys. So in your code, you can do rails.applications.credential.some API key bang, which is going to throw an exception if that API key, that variable is empty. In the old .env file, you'd have in your code to do that. Oh, if this is empty, if this is new, then throw an exception or do something else. So let me see. All right, that's it. So let me go now here to my terminal and let me show you guys a few things. So this is the app that we built for the hackathon. And so let me see what I'm going to do here. Let me go back here to my presentation. Let me get my handy. Okay, so there is one interesting thing as well that I didn't note there, that I didn't show in there, right? So, okay, let's just add this one, right? So add editor VI. All right, so that's what I'm going to do, right? So that's this is a little bit of what they say, right? So I have an app name, I have a passkeys, and that's my origin. So this is the passkeys hackathon stuff. So that's the website, and this is the variable that I have to change. So I was using a different domain, one of the domains that I have, and I had to change from that to the .dev. So I had to come here, change these from .io to .dev, and then save it. And then you see, you do git start. Now you change the encrypted, right? So this is actually the encrypted version of those credentials, right? So credentials.yaml.env. You see it? So you can read. So and then I have to commit that to the repo, publish, and then do the whole production deployment just because like, oh, no, I don't want that domain, I want this domain, just one environment variable. By the way, if you have your database credentials here and you're cycling your passwords, whatever cycling password policies your company has, so change cycling passwords means PRs, git commit, and production deployments. It goes a little beyond what used to be. So I find that, I'm not sure if I like these too much, but anyway, that's one difference. So let me move on here now. There is another detail that I want to show you guys.
It's not an all or nothing, right? So you could put the things that you find appropriate to put on that credentials file, and the things
Indeed.
that you are likely to change regularly, you could still keep them on environments, right?
Perfect. Yeah, you can mix and match both of them, the .env and the other ones. In the main pitch of these is because it's encrypted. So versus the .env file, which is plain text. I still don't buy that too much because if you get access to an SSH into your machine, the master key is going to be there, right? So I have here the master key, my master keys. So they are, let me see where they are here. I think they're in config. There you go, master key, right? So I have the master key here. So if I SSH here, or if I SSH to if someone breaks into one of my production machines, the master key is going to be there because the application does. And then if you know a little bit, you can get the credentials, your database password and all that kind of stuff. So the encrypted thing is like, I'm not sure if I fully understand
what
what.
the threat model that they are going against is if you keep everything on the regular M files, people tend to commit the M file with the credentials in plain text to your local storage. But if you put that on that encrypted file, what is committed to Git is always encrypted.
Yep.
If you get access to a server, then yes, you have access. If you can exploit the application, then you have access to the application. If you can get access to the machine, then you get access to the credentials. Yep. But the traditional model where people mistakenly add the password to the M file and then commit that to the repository, push it to GitHub, that one is.
It is a little bit more secure, but there is still a security gap in there. I remember when Rails and DHH started the encrypted values in the active record, right? So you can now encrypt a given attribute in that column in the table. People you're like, oh, we have end-to-end encryption or the kind of stuff. Like, if with 5 minutes, a smart Rails developer can bypass that. If you get to SSH, you can. But anyway, there's definitely some extra barriers. The barrier to get to your data is a couple steps further. It's not as easy as a .env file. All right, let me keep.
The thing on the .env, the track is people committing it and pushing it to GitHub. It's not people getting access to the server or the application.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, in that case, if you allow to commit, you can commit, and as long as you.
I think there has been multiple instances of like people doing like some research on GitHub and finding tons of those env files or credentials committed to your repository. So like, if you have a default, Rails application by default put credentials on the encrypted file. Your chances of committing it are.
And here the problem is, let me mention, there's two things I want to mention here before we move on to the next one. Here, your problem are your keys, right?
Right.
If you commit your encryption key to GitHub, then you lose, because with that, you can decrypt what is there. But Rails credential does something really interesting. I'm going to show you here now. So let me kind of move on here and let's see what else I have in here to talk. Okay, so okay, so there is this thing here, right? Rails credential help, maybe credentials help. Oh, there you go. And it kind of explains a bunch of stuff, and you can read it in your command line if you like to. And then there is one thing that's different from .env file, right? So remember, .env, if you're used to .env, the global one, you can define stuff in the .env. And then in the .env.development, you can override. But when you run Rails C and run your application, your environment is a union of the two files, .env and .env development. So if you have some stuff set in .env that's not set in .env.development, that gets set in your environment. For credentials, that's a little bit different. So let me show you guys here what that looks like. Let me do a quick demo here and then show you that. So, all right, so here I'm going to do a test, D4 test, right? So, okay, so that, no, I'm going to put here global. Okay, so, oops. I'm going to do global here. And then, okay, global. Okay, so I'm going to do global, right? So now if I run Rails C, and I'm going to run that Rails credentials, right? Rails, you see application dot credentials. So here kind of shows your entire stuff, and then here shows your whole configuration, right? Passkeys and that and this. You see that what I just said here is not here, right? The reason why it's not here is because I have a development credentials. So what gets set at the global, it doesn't show up in the development. So so the way I would do that is, the way I would access that is rails.application.credentials. How did I call that? Global, right? No, test. The first one is test. So it's not here. But if I do this now, where do I need to do the Rails and... Oh, no, not that. So here is like dash environment equals test. So now I'm gonna look at the credentials for the test environment, and I have none. You see, it just empties the default one. So I'm not gonna save these. So if I do Rails env test, okay, let me. Oh, it did save. So you see here what happens. Let me talk about one other thing. You see, append. It did end up creating that key, and it appended the encryption key to the git ignore file. So if I do git status, you can see that the test key got added automatically. So they kind of help you to make sure that that file gets to the git ignore. So if you do that, and then the git commit, git add, git commit, git push, boom, go. If you go follow that process automatically, that's going to be added to the git ignore file. So, but I want to show you that I'm going to remove these. So credentials, test, YAML enc, and then I'm going to do, okay, that's all I need. So I'm going to do Rails and test Rails C, right? So now I'm going to load the test environment. So now if I go Rails application dot credentials dot test, boom, it's there. And you see, it gives me that hash structure that you can easily navigate in your code, right? So if I do now, let's do one more level of that. So let me change this guy, right? So I'm gonna do test one level. And then if I do that, and you see, remember, I changed my variable, so these gets changed. So now if I do my Rails C test environment, and I go back there, and you see, you keep nesting that. You can have as many levels you want. And then now let's do the other. So here, what's happening is the testing environment doesn't have credentials, and then when you run Rails C, or when you run your application, it picks up from the global, from the equivalent to the .env. But as soon as we set Rails env edit -- environment equals test, as soon as we set one, so I'm going to delete, I'm just going to use this AWS key here, right? As soon as I set one from the test environment, and then the encryption key gets created in this, and then I do my Rails C, I lose that. I lose everything that was in the global. So because now the testing environment has only those AWS keys, and then now rails.application.credentials only have the AWS. It loses all that. All right, so let me see here if there is anything else there. Anybody has any question, comments, concerns?
Yeah. You said that there is no hierarchical
.env.
but there is.
In the .env file, there is?
No, I didn't understand.
So, okay, so that's so this is Rails credentials. Oh, no.
On the ENV, it merges whatever you have on the
Yeah.
.env with
Yeah.
the .test.
Exactly.
On this credentials, they don't.
Yeah, on the .env world, your environment is a union of what is in the .env file versus .env of development. And if you have the same value, the same key in both, the lower level, the .development, it's the one that gets the preference. And then you don't have that in the, so the Rails credentials don't have that. All right. And okay, so just the only thing that I didn't show here is the handy validation, right? So let me see if I remember what that is. So Rails and test, that's fine, whichever it is. So what you do is rails.application.credentials.some API key. And then if you use that bang, then you see some API keys blank. So in your test, you can do that, and that throws an event. If it's empty, you do it. You don't need to treat that error case or anything else. You just put the bang in, and if it throws an exception, someone's going to deal with that. So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about as far as Rails credential goes. Before we move into benchmark IPS Jam, any question? Tristan, is there any question in the streaming there? No, all good?
How do you manage nested keys? Are you encouraged to use nested keys?
That's a good question. Like I said, I haven't used Rails credentials too much. This application that I showed is one of my pet projects. This is a side project. It is in production, but I only have a secret in one domain configurable.
It's not a matter of encouraging or not, is that you have the option. On the environment purpose, you don't, right? Because it's a flat namespace. Yeah. So for example, in the example of AWS, you can have an AWS and then key and then bucket name and then whatever as a proper hash structure with as many levels as it makes sense. Yeah. On the environment, you don't have that option. So you end up with AWS underscore key AWS.
But in Bitcoin, you can have it before very soon when you set your server before
Yeah, you can have the default value, which
But
you would have here as well.
I thought just now if you don't set it in the global, if you put it in a test environment, you won't get global keys.
So if you have a test key on the global and a test key on the environment, they don't get merged. You get one or the other. Yes. But if you don't have it on the file, then you get what's on the global.
If I don't set the key in the global context, but I set the key in the test environment context, what would happen?
You get on the test, the one
Yes,
test.
but if I were to develop the whole test environment, would it raise an error?
Maybe if you want.
If I don't set the key, if I don't define the key in the global context, I set the key in the test environment.
Uh-huh.
No way. Like the AWS example that we showed, you didn't have it.
So you won't have it, right? So would that be a risk of me deploying to an environment that has not been set a key yet? That would write another configuration, create the new equipment also that doing the problem.
So you have to you manage your credentials over here now, right? So if you have a specific one for production, if you don't want to use the global, like using the global for production environment, which is this application is doing because I didn't set a specific one for production. I'm not sure if it's a good idea because that's a global. You don't want to misuse some production stuff in the global in your development environment or anything. So you have a production one, and it's more likely that it's only going to use it for production. But if you're managing your production credentials, you need to make sure that when you're managing here, you do the right environment. And each one of them, they're going to have their own set of credentials. So if you have the same set of credentials in multiple environments, you have to do an edit and create these things one by one. I was going to show you here, there is these guys, right? So I'm not sure if you guys heard about Jumpstart Rails, but this guy has a really long look. I'm on my Ubuntu, so let me see if I know how to zoom in. Oh, there you go. So you see, these when you build a Jumpstart Rails, an app based on this template, they have a huge set of stuff. But look at how they organize these. You see, they put the environment inside your key, but and then they use the global, and then inside the global they put the environment, and then you see development and production. So and then probably inside the code you do some handy Rails dot application dot credentials dot send Rails dot env, and use something like that to make not the big one. But if you have a key that's in the production environment, if you want that key to be available to all environments in your development stage in production with different values, you have to run these added here for each one of those environments and manage them manually. So it's a little bit manual. But in the .env world, you probably would do the same. Maybe it's easy because you do .env, cp.env, development.
So the difference here is this: in order to edit that file, the test file or the encrypted, you need to have the key.
You also need to have the key.
If you have those, you could have your production values with a production master key that nobody has access to.
Exactly.
So only the person that has that one, because it's not in the repository, can go and edit the production.
Exactly.
And on your development environment, you have a different file with which all the developers have access to the key. The key is not sacred. So on your local, you can use it.
That's
a level of complexity.
That's a good point, because in this application that we built, it was me and two other developers that was working on it. So the way they say, like, oh, you put in your password manager and you share. It's like two friends who don't have password manager sharing. So I just send an email to you like, hey, here, this is the key for the development environment. So you need the repo. I gave you access to the repo, and then here's your master key for the development environment, for the development master key, so they can develop the application.
But this is a good point, because you need to figure out what the details are, and then you need to add in the different environments, and each one has a different key. Then there is a process there, like who does the update for this? You as a developer change the development version, and then someone needs to make the same edits with the correct values for production.
There's some interesting challenges here, because, for example, you now, whoever at the top decide, you DevOps guys have the key for the production environment, so you can manage that. Now, the other interesting thing that in larger teams can have problems is all the developers, they have to have the exact same environment, because the values are committed to the repo, right? So the encrypted version of your set of credentials is committed. So if in my local machine I name my database user, my database schema one way, another developer cannot do another way, and it doesn't matter the name and the password of the database user in my laptop to another developer. But if we're all using that credential from the encrypted version, the database username, password, port number, everything on my machine is going to be the same across everybody. There's pros and cons to almost everything we do, but you kind of don't. Each developer don't have a way like, oh no, I want to run Docker Postgres on port 9000. No, you can't. Either everybody runs Postgres on 5432 or whatever is in that encrypted credentials, or there's going to be a problem, or one developer cannot, is going to have to one developer is going to have to work like these, right? So every time he pulls the latest, he's going to have to change one of the, in my machine, and then keep these things showing up here in your Git editor if you're managing your control in your local machine, right? So if I look here on my VS Code, where the VS Code is, VS Code is over here. So if I look here in my, so all those changes are there, right? So the task key got added, the encrypted one changed, right? So, but if I change one configuration file, because in my machine I run Postgres on port 9000, then I'm going to see these, and I'm going to have to make sure that I don't commit that to the repo. Anyway, any other question on Rails credentials?
Carlos says if you run Docker, you don't have to run.
I did not say that.
I was told to not touch that point.
Tristan knows me well enough. He read my mind.
The other day,
Carlos itching.
the other day, someone asked in a Slack channel, "Oh, what is your Rail? What is the nowadays Rails developer toolkit?" There was one guy that said like this: "I use Docker for everything. I don't care whether every time I need to start up my laptop, I need to build everything up and then shut down everything up. But I use Docker for everything." And I was like, "How do I join this conversation? I never in my life used Docker for my development environment. You know, I steered away from Docker. Like I feel like me, and the problem must be me, right? So if I'm not using Docker, but anyway, I just to put some context, I work with Ruby on Rails for like 10, 11 years, and I never used Rails. I used Rails since Rails 2. Before Bundler even exists. So the first 10 years of my career, I did a bunch of C++ for Solaris. So I learned how to package my binary, right, to install and use pkg add, pkg trans, and that kind of stuff. So the first Rails app that I built, I packaged the gems myself using the stuff that I learned in C++. But anyway, Docker is not on my tool set yet. Hopefully we move away from that soon.
We want to.
All right.
I don't want to hijack your presentation.
All right. Let's get into the next one. Benchmark IPS. Has anybody here has ever came across these, Jim? Raise your hand. One. Tristan, did you raise your hand? No.
I'll raise the top hand.
Okay, all right. So this is called by Evan Phoenix, right? So one of the key guys in the Rails community, right? So that's the gem. There is here some documentation. It's kind of pretty good. And I used this gem for a long time. I came across these, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe even more. I don't use all the time, but from time to time, when I'm reviewing PRs, I'm like, is this code slower or faster? So you're reviewing a PR, right? Someone decided to change a string concatenation from one way to another. That's a little spoiler here. We'll talk a little bit about string concatenation in a bit. But every time I'm reviewing a PR, I do this. One time in one team that I worked, we actually started doing this in the PR. It's like, hey, I want you to benchmark this because I want people to kind of understand that you need to be careful the code that you run in Rails, right? So object allocation, all that kind of stuff. So sometimes you can do some damage. So we end up doing this, which is what I'm going to show you guys here. If I can, there you go. So this is what I'm going to show you here. I did this on this application, my hackathon application. So in lib, we create a benchmark folder. And then in each PR, you can benchmark some code. And then you say, oh, yeah, here, I benchmark this change, and it's faster and it's lower. So let me see here before I jump into, so I don't, oops, that's supposed to be minimized. So let me see here what I'm going to, before I get into that. All right, so that's the gem. And there is some cool stuff. You can benchmark, now you can benchmark and share it. And if you see here, this is one of the benchmarks that I did. That's what it looks like. It's a very simple page, but shows online the benchmark. So this is one of the benchmarks that you'll see. This is what is in the gem documentation. So if you look at one of the documentation is this one here. They do a report, a benchmark comparing, like it's like A/B test, right? Compares which code is faster. So you can use multiple ones, but so he does an addition like this, 1 + 2, and then another way to add 1 + 2, he does some weird while here, or you do 2 strings, or you do this way, right? So really long format. That's how you build a benchmark. You compare 2 codes. And so this one here, I'm sorry. This one is that benchmark from the documentation. So, and the way you read these is, you see this is amount of iterations per second. So this one is 1.289 slower. This is 132, and these two are about the same, right? Oh, there you go. Great.
Right.
Man, now I know how to do that in Ubuntu. So the way you read these is like this is iterations per second. So during the same period of time, these two ones run 59 and 6 million times, and these was 46 million times. So these took a lot longer. So for the same amount of time, you run that. So that's 1.29 times slower, and this is 1.32. And this is like an error. These value plus 1% error and so on. So that's an interesting thing. You can share one of the benchmarks that you do. And going back to our presentation, another interesting thing that I didn't know about it, these two things are new since I last used this gem. There is this Calibera gem, which is like someone's PhD thesis about some statistics. So it looks like you can use that. And I obviously did not read the gem nor the PhD, the person's PhD thesis, but it's under advanced settings. So it seems like some really interesting stuff. And
What does it offer?
I think this gem, it's how you calculate the median of these things, right? Because so the whole benchmark, the benchmark gem is like this. It takes the same amount of time and run the code multiple times, and then you run multiple code for the same amount of time, like 5 seconds, 3 seconds, and then measures how many times you run. I think that gem it has something about how it calculates times the tiny discrepancies between average, median, and 95 percentile, this kind of stuff. I don't know exactly. I might be completely wrong, but it's something related to that. I didn't read too much, but it's some advanced stuff. Last time I spoke for 2 hours. Today I don't want to speak for 2 hours. So there is way too much stuff that. But anyway, maybe tomorrow I'm gonna maybe next week I'm gonna read that. Requirements. There's no requirements. That's simple to use it. So let's get into that. Let me show you guys a little bit of code here now.
So let me ask a question. The benchmark IPS gem is as opposed to the benchmark that comes to Ruby. And I remember there is a difference. That's why I was like, I remember this, but I don't remember the details. Because Ruby has a benchmark eternity, and there is a difference between that gem. I remember using it in the past. What is it?
That's a good question. When I tried to search for these gems, like, what is the name of the gem that I used to use? I couldn't remember. I was like, good, it's benchmark something. But this is benchmark IPS. So this is specific about iterations per second. So I'm going to measure how many times I can loop through that piece of code and then compare. If this piece of code in 5 seconds I can loop 1 million times, and these I can loop 2 million times in the same amount of time, the number of iterations that I run that code per second, it's higher. That means that code is faster. So it uses these specific, or maybe that's kind of the difference between the benchmark IPS, this gem, and the benchmark gem that doesn't use the IPS at the end. But I'm just using a little semantics here to give you a little bit of my best guess, my educated guess. All right, so let's get into this here now. Let me show you guys. So let's do some benchmarking here. So one versus another. So this is the one that I showed you guys, right? So that's from the gem. And the way I'm gonna run these is going to be, I should have put these in the same screen. The way I'm gonna run that is ruby lib benchmark one versus another. And then it's gonna run. There is a warm up period that you can warm up, and then it runs the test and calculates the discrepancy and then give you the results. So it's gonna run, and you see the other one we saw that this one was 42 million, and the other two was close to 6 millions, to 60 million. And there we go, 42, 42, and 57, 59. Same-ish fall within the same error. So sometimes the time is difference is small and you can predict which one is faster. But that's how you run. If you want to share these, you just do these. Share equals 1. And then at the end, it gives you an URL. So you run these, you post it to these little servers that someone around the world is hosting and sponsoring. And then you can have that nice URL to send to your friend or whatever, to your colleague that you guys are working together. So let me wait and see how that goes. And all right, I'm running out of time here. I'm gonna skip this a little bit, and I'll show you a little bit. Okay, anyway, 625, right? So that's the URL that they're giving me now. So now if I go back to my browser here, you see I had 621, 623, 622, 623 again. So let's put 625. So that's the one that we just ran. Now, one or more entries has fairly high standard deviation. This means that the iterations were not very consistent and subject to effects outside the code. So this is a specific one. One interesting thing that I was talking to my colleague that wrote this code here. And one of the interesting things that was like, I know that there is a way for you to disable garbage collector and then see how many total objects got allocated for each test. So you can see which code allocated more objects. They may run the same speed, both codes, but maybe one allocates 30% more objects than the other one. So there's a couple of things that you can couple these with the garbage collectors and maybe disable garbage collectors. So one test doesn't get skewed by all garbage collector, Ruby garbage decided to run in the middle of the tests, in the middle of the iteration. So that time is going to be added here. I think that's what this note here is, or machine load, right? So I'm running everything here on my laptop, and the first one, my OS decided to spend CPU elsewhere, and then that code gets executed slower. So anyway, let me go back to some interesting stuff. Why I'm here talking to you guys about this PR, about this gem, is because of this PR. So this is a PR for the same app, the Hackathon Passkeys app. So I wrote this code, and so I was building some stuff, and then I was gonna set that. And one of my teammates, one of my colleagues that participated in the same team in the hackathon, he refactored my code, not because he wanted to make it fast or anything, but because he needed this try-generated code elsewhere in another code. This is just a hackathon app. We're not worried about the code, how it looks. We just need to work. So we have very little time to do everything we want. But when I look at that PR, I was like, okay, I'm going to merge it because he's building some feature. He needs these. We don't care. But that's a Ruby My Meetup good material. I am going to run a benchmark on those two codes and see which one is faster, mine or his. And you see, my code is very simple. This is an active record. So I just build a new object, a new model, and then I set that attribute, right? So this is how I'm going to set the code that secure random UID. And then he did this whole stuff here, .new, .tab, ampersand, try generating code. And this is another method. So if you're used to kind of knowing stack trace, and like if every time you call a method, you put a method in the stack trace, and then your CPU need to go process, do a bunch of stuff. So it's expensive to run methods. If you're looking to that fraction of time, we are not looking at the fraction of time. So I approve and merge the PR. Like I'm gonna benchmark the code, and I want to see which one is faster, just out of curiosity, right? So I wanted to know if all these shenanigans here, all these tap, ampersand, comma stuff, and spends too much time inside these Ruby, how do you call these? This style of Ruby coding, if this is too slow, okay, maybe we're going to refactor that code. If it's not too slow, whatever, doesn't matter. So anyway, but that's why I got into this I need to benchmark that. So let me see what I have here. Okay, so this is what I showed you guys. Oh, no, hold on, that's not it. Okay, so let's now go into that, right? So let me show you what I did to benchmark the code. So build new. There we go. This is what the benchmark looks like. I kept the same stuff here. I didn't poke around these config and one time. But here, this is the code that I want to do. This one I did later on because I want to kind of have a baseline, right? This is the cheapest one that can have. I'm just going to allocate an object. And then here is that code, the new code, the code that my colleague wrote to refactor mine, which runs a new, do a tap, and then call that other method. And this is the original code that I have, right? And so let's benchmark that. So, oh, that's not it. Let's benchmark. So here now I'm going to do something a little bit different. So now I'm going to do require. Let me see if I have it here. There we go. So which one is this? Challenge build new. So challenge build new. The reason why I'm doing these now in the Rails C is because I need the whole Rails environment, the models, the database connections, and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm going to run those two things. And then because I'm running in Rails C, you're going to see a bunch of stuff here, and then we're going to go back and see the results. So there's the warm up. And here we can have a bunch of stuff because I can hear sometimes my CPU is kind of flashing here. And so anyway, didn't show some mumbo jumbo stuff. Anyway, so this is the just allocation, right? I was expecting these to be faster, and I didn't have this one at the beginning, the just allocation, just do the new object, just because these two codes were so close together. You see 99,001 and 1,000 that I was like, are these really close to each other? And they are actually very close in performance from each other. And even though if this one, oh, there you go, here's the, even though this runs another method, do a bunch of stuff, do tap to get the object, and then run another method, they run the same amount of time. And after like thinking a little bit about it, I realized that this is active record initializer. And what I'm doing that initializer is like I'm passing a hash with an unknown number of key values. So inside this active record new, if you get a hash, you're just going to loop through the entire hash. So this looks simpler than these and more potential to be faster. But inside the new method initializer, active record is doing a lot of heavy lifting to pass the hash and key values so I can assign those values or something like that. I didn't look into how active record new does when it receives a hash, but I know that I can do code, name, all these stuff, right? I can do a bunch of stuff like that. So anyway, so that's kind of what I did. And then after that, I was like, okay, so I'm running everything on my laptop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run only one of them at a time. So I'm going to try as much as I can to one test, like the garbage collector thing, right? Because I'm allocating objects, right? So I'm going to run them individually. So one test does not skew the other one. Imagine the first one allocates 10,000 objects, the second one starts and then gets to a garbage collector threshold, and then the garbage collector decides to run and then pauses the entire Ruby code, and then one test is more than the other. So what I did was as a matter of simplicity, I just create the same code 3 times, and each time I commented one of them. And then here, what I wanted to do is this. I'm going to run each one of them. So challenge, just allocation. And then, okay, I'm not going to remember the name. Just a lock. just a lock. Because then here, because they do iterations per second, the time is the same, the warm-up is always the same, what I'm going to compare at the end is which one runs more iterations. So, and then there we go. So this one run 14 times, and then just a lock, just, what is the name of the file? Just tap and just non-tap. Just tap, that's the new code that my friend wrote. And he run 10,000 times. Oh, this is a warm up. Okay, so this is the total. This is the number that I want, right? He runs 148,000 times. The tap runs 100,000, and then the just non-tap. Just because like I want to make sure that I'm getting these right. They're really close together, trying to run a couple of times, and you see here 98,000. So the isolated tests, they kind of run the same amount of time compared to the together. So I was kind of, okay, all right. His code was faster. The dot tap, calling another method in the method chain, going there elsewhere, doing all the things that the Ruby needs to do under the cover to find the method definition, run the code, and execute the value. It's actually faster than the active record hash assignment. And that was the opposite of my impression when I saw this code. Like, in order for Ruby to do all this stuff, it must be spending a ton of time. But I wasn't realized that this new also inside the new active record, it is doing heavy lifting to do that. So this code is actually faster. Any question there?
Because the try-generate code is actually a memorization of secure grammar. Does that make any difference? Because I'm not sure how performance.
No, it doesn't. Because what happens is every time I'm calling, I'm allocating a new object. So every time the memorization doesn't do anything. But we can actually, that is an interesting thing. So we could do a benchmark and see if the memorization is doing anything.
Because my guess is that maybe the secure random is strong because it's generating a random UUID for you.
No, in both cases, you're going to run one secure random UID. Because when you initialize this object for the first time, like here, right? So this code, right? When you do this new, that code is new. That object is plain. There is nothing. So the try generate, it is going to execute the secure random.
But the try generator just returns you the variable back.
The try generator, let me see here. It assigns the code.
Assigns or no, but it's a new object.
Yeah, so this new creates a new object, and then the type run this. And then in this case here is doing a new and is assigning the value using the active record initializer with the hash.
Because the try generate code is inside of
Yeah. But one interesting thing is by the fact they're using memorization here, which in this code I don't think it needs. It would be interesting to test the memorization code with and without the memorization, because in this case I don't think it needs memorization, because you're not going to run these all the time. You create one object and save, and that's it, goes for it. It doesn't keep calling all the time in the code itself. So we could see which one is faster. If I'm not using memorization, we can see if the memorization is spending, how much time is it spending.
I don't think it would make much difference.
Yeah.
It's because I thought on a different, I thought the code was, I didn't know that try generate code was inside
Yep.
your class. I thought it was a completely different method.
No, yeah, it's in the same class, same model. All right. Before we go,
Not really a question, but just a note. This is a good thing. Benchmarking things is easy, right? And whenever people have conversations about like performance, many times like, oh, this is fast. It's like, don't reason about it. Just run the code and see the numbers.
Exactly. That's it.
Straightforward.
Yeah. All right, in order for us to finish, before I go, let's do this string concatenation. This is an interesting story. How much time I have? 5 minutes. I learned these two things, right? There's two ways, there is many ways of concatenate strings in Ruby, right? The most common, you do plus equal. If you're like me, back in the day, you do C++, you do plus equal for a lot of stuff. You don't do plus equal for strings in C++, but you use plus equal for a lot. And then in Ruby, there's this stuff. And also .NET, there's other languages, I think Java also have this stuff. When I came to Ruby, this was like, what the heck is that? That's not how you concatenate strings. But one day, after, I don't know, I was working with Rails for, 9 years. And I was working with a junior Rails developer. And she always concatenates strings this way. It's like, I was reviewing a lot of PRs for her for like 6 months. And I was like, every time she uses concatenate strings this way. And I always use this way because plus equal is kind of natural to me because of my background in C++. And then one day I was like, which one is faster? Just any question. Who would guess? Raise your hand if you think this is faster than this. Plus equal is faster. Who thinks plus equal is faster? Nobody? Who thinks bigger, smaller sign is faster? Why? There is a really interesting Ruby and Rails problem in here. Ruby internally, if you do this, so I learned this because I was not tired. I was so curious to review so many PIs of these lady junior developers. I was like, why she always use this? Like, I got curious one day. I was like, I started poking around these on the terminal, on the Rails C, and I realized that when you do this plus equal allocates a second string object and return a second object. The object ID of that variable is different. So 2 objects are allocated. This one, no extra object is allocated. And the benchmark shows that. So if we look at the 622, where is the 622 here now? Oh, let's just put 622 here. Look at that. Concat with plus equal, right? It runs 9.2 million times. Is 1.37 slower, 30% slower, something like that, around that. With equal, it runs 13 times. And then if you do ampersand, do pound, curly, right? That is even faster than this one. So if you are concatenate strings, you should use these. You should not use plus equal. I think the main reason for that is the object allocation, because Ruby, in order to run the plus equal, Ruby allocates a new object, concatenate the 2, and return the new object. And then the old object loses reference, gets garbage collected, and that kind of stuff. What is this? Bigger or smaller signs? Bigger sign. It doesn't. At the end, the object is the same. And
The sign should be the other direction.
I'm sorry?
The sign should be the other direction. It's the minus, not the bigger.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, good. Yeah, good eye, good catch. Anyway, so that's okay. This is the result that we saw at 623, 622. I run these a couple times, and yeah, it's the other side. So that's, you see, in this benchmark was 1.41 slower. That's it for today. I only spoke for an hour, so that's a lot of improvements from last time. Questions?
How do you work benchmarking in general for
So that's a great question. So there is no one size fits all for benchmarking, right? So these you are zooming in, it's like a unit test, right? You're zooming into two types of code and see which one is faster. So you're not looking at your application, HTTP request response cycle, none of that. You're looking at your code and trying to isolate as much as you can. But to benchmark your app, I mean, you have a ton of different ways, right? So are you going to benchmark end to end, right? So are you going to put in the staging environment behind the load balancer, no load balancer? You're going to make you need to decide what you want to do. What do you want to, I guess, what do you want to benchmark? Nowadays, with all these observability tools, the approach that I use is like, I look at the 95, 99 percentile and try to find for outliers. Try to look for those API endpoints or routes that takes forever, that gets highlighted in your observability tool, because then you look at production, right? You look real data, real customers. So if you find your outlier there, one endpoint, one route in your application that's really slow, then you go and then you look into that. Then you're gonna do an X-ray on that. Then there are other jams that you do. There's one that it does like a flame graph, and look at your entire stack, all the methods called, and tell you where most of the time is spent. I think even New Relic shows that in the New Relic dashboard. So it's low. You found one outlier, right? One endpoint that's low that you want to improve the performance. I feel like going from there, to me, it feels like more productive, because you have the data in production, and then if you find a code and you refactor the code, deploy the code in production and let New Relic see if that was working. I mean, you can try to replicate in your machine as well. There are some jams that if you put in they can pry in the middle of your code. I've done that once, long time ago. Like, no, I don't remember.
That's mini profiler.
Mini profile, because then you put them in that you define the code you want to profile, and then you run your HTTP request, and then you profile that code, and then you look at all these stack traces where most of the time is spent, and then if you do an A/B test in your own machine, you can get a good sense of whether the new code and the old code is in production, how they compare to each other, because then it's like you have a data right there that tells you that this is faster, and then you deploy to production and you validate that, right? So the code that runs your machine, it's not perfect, but it's a good data to use. And then you deploy to production and you see in your Relic if that's going to make any difference or not. I think that's kind of what I like to do in performance, because it starts from a data on an outlier in production. Because if it runs well on my machine, but it doesn't affect the customers, if it's an endpoint that's hit 1% of the time in your whole application and is low, that's fine.
Was that the question? I think you asked something different, right?
So sort of trying to see. So sometimes when we look at these examples, right, it's quite straightforward. I think you get 4 or 5 ways of doing something versus benchmarking next to each other. But for your example, production, you tend to look at, maybe you look from the overall latency. Then from there, you look at the profiling and go into the drill down map. So is this something, should I be looking at my controller model, or is it some other part that needs to be optimized before you finally face something up that's so specific that makes you 50% increase? Right. Whereas if you look at your thread profiles, they generally don't give you that much of a difference. So I was wondering if you guys automate this as part of your MR, maybe your code quality, you have a code quality scanning tool that fishes these out immediately, or you just eyeball this like, hey, this looks a bit weird.
So these gem I use for these things. It's just a little bit of like a learning process. Like, is this fast or the other? Just like our curiosity that I do these. And then if I'm on a team and like, hey guys, does this sound interesting to anybody? Let's kind of get together here and try to do some of
I
these
find
things.
that I use a benchmark gem when I'm trying to prove something next to each other. My method is still yours, but as part of like just regular production, I don't necessarily go and look for these
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it doesn't make sense to have like as part of like every MR because not everything is performance is critical, right? So if you want to spend time optimizing every single detail, you spend a lot of effort for little to no gain. There are parts that are really important and parts that I could spend 10 times as much and it wouldn't make a difference, right? So as a regular thing, like every merge request having some sort of performance doesn't make sense. But on the other hand, for critical paths, for things that are really important, it makes sense as part of somehow for automated test suite that it runs and checks the time that it takes. So that if you inadvertently in a change causes that to go above a certain threshold, then you get a test failure that draws your attention, like, oh, what did I do that caused that to happen?
And typically, like it's hard to benchmark an entire transaction that
Right.
expects multiple classes, but maybe let's say I'm optimizing a calculator service, for example, or a very specific module, then yeah, probably would just benchmark as within that local class or module, but I would find it hard to test an entire round trip latency because the delta between some of these might not be very obvious.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of.
And end-to-end tests, like I was saying, staging environment, it's like I don't find these useful because of that. Like your latency to staging environment, it's smaller. If your Wi-Fi here is more busy and you're gonna lose it, there's way too many variables that go wrong to skew your data, and then you end up not finding any
Benchmark
good insight.
on end-to-end is a bit noisy. So yeah.
But Mini Profiler, that one's an interesting one because it gives you a bunch of stuff. It gives you the N+1 queries, it gives you a flame graph, which code is hot and where you spend most of the time. Like in a stack trace in a typical HTTP request response cycle, Rails code is going to run like 100 methods. And then you zoom in like this method here, 50% of the time is spent in that method. So then you look into that and try to see which code in there is spending more time. And then maybe if you look into that, then you're going to be looking at something like this, right? So maybe if you find one of those methods, you're going to be looking something like this, like, is this, if I replace this to something like this, only that code, one code compared to the other, then maybe you use benchmark IPS for that.
You do the discovery on the thing that does that.
Yeah, you zoom in and then you find, and then maybe use this gem for that. So, but anyway, that's it, guys. Any more questions before I say thank you? There you go. Thank you all for your time and your attention. Thanks for coming.
There's still more pizza. It's cold now. So we have a microwave. How about non-Ruby questions? Do you have any more?
Oh, hold on! It's not the end of it. Oh, I'm sorry. There is more. I'm sorry, guys. I got a little.
Here's your presentation.
Yeah, I need to go back to the slides.
Present.
Yeah. I'm gonna share it again. I stopped sharing already. All right. So that's it for the presentation. Now let's go back to this guy. Parking lot. Anybody doing anything interesting that you want to share? Like Docker?
I'm waiting for us to finish.
Ubuntu.
Because we can easily talk.
Okay. All right.
Has anyone tried using Stimulus.js before?
I think we use stimulus in our production.
You are? We've started it in one of our applications. It's quite nice, easy. It's back to the days of jQuery without the clunkiness of jQuery.
Yeah, that's how I heard it.
No, because if you
It's not the birth of React, but
Yeah.
it's still a nicer way of arranging it.
Yeah.
You should have a nice middle ground in the
if you've started web development before React and all of these frameworks, right? You did development where you have HTML and then you have JavaScript included. it's back to those types, but to that type, but it's not plugins. You don't have to do your own import. It's a lot more supported. There's a lot more of a framework involved, but it doesn't get in your way. It doesn't give you, like, you have to do this. You cannot, for example, in React, you're not supposed to override the shadow DOM. You're not supposed to access elements directly because React wouldn't know about it and it won't let it work properly, right? In Stimulus.js, it's all just JavaScript and it's fine. And you can use DOM query selector if you want. You don't have to use like Stimulus targets or whatever. But what makes it Stimulus.js really good for Rails applications is that you don't have any setup. It's already working there. You can integrate Stimulus.js with WordPress, for example, it works well. But then you have your special setup to make sure that the controller name is like this and you can import it in that way. But in Rails, everything works almost the same as your view, your ERP files in your Stimulus controller. So the way you use it is very Rails-like. So I would recommend it. If, we're still figuring things out as well, so I don't think we're ready for an actual talk. But you should investigate it at least, or try it out. It's great for, I think the previous way they used, they call JavaScript like this is called sprinkles or something. Yeah, if you really need some sprinkles of JavaScript, like most of your site is HTML, but you want some dynamic stuff, like you want to show or hide something, and you don't need to go for full React for this, then Stimulus.js is perfect. It's like, it fills in a lot of the use cases you would use jQuery on.
That's cool. Yeah, I haven't. That's a good talk material for the meetup. I'm sure you guys are going to be ready, and at some point, and will be make an interesting talk. Hiring shout outs. Our friends are Hivekind. Yeah, hiring. Our friend Katie Sport is still hiring the UI UX roles. So I suggest you guys check those guys out. And see you all next month. Now this is it. Now that's the end. That's the actual end.
Can we talk Docker now?
Oh, we're going to talk Docker the rest of the night now.
I'm curious, what don't you like about it? Because I have things that I don't like, but I'm curious what
All right.
what your concerns or complaints are.
All right. Tristan, you there? You Andy, you're going to make a round on everybody?
No, it's fine.
All right. I'm good. You stopped it's not live anymore?
Are you going to talk about something private?
No, we just now the end of it. But that's good.